Welcome everyone to today's podcast. My name is Paul. I'm in Peterhead. I'm a very happy member of Cocaine Anonymous, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Denis.
Hi, Denis, recovered addict. Really nice for you to get me on this meeting this morning, Paul. Thanks for that. And I'm going to mainly sort of address, there's going to be a number of people that are going to be listening to this, but mainly I'm sort of addressing anyone that's new in the room, welcome. Anyone that's back off a relapse, welcome. Anyone that's struggling, you're more than welcome. I found this solution in Cocaine Anonymous predominantly. I dipped in and out of sort of other fellowships, and C.A saved my life. So I'm really grateful, and I'm really grateful that you've asked me to share today, Paul.
Well, I'm really pleased you're here. So just before we get into the body of the podcast, I just want to say and echo what Denis already said. Welcome everybody. Please feel free to subscribe and check out the other videos. There's now about 18 videos. There's one on each of the 12 steps. There's one on the spiritual malady. There's addiction, the ABCs, addiction and recovery, the ABCs. There's one on an introduction to CA program steps and fellowship. There we have 3 podcasts on sponsorship. What is sponsorship? Am I ready to become a sponsor? And how do I sponsor? So please feel free to check out those podcasts. We're not spokesmen for Cocaine Anonymous. We're simply members sharing our experience. Feel free to comment. If you think we've missed anything or anything's not quite right, feel free to put it in the chat below and we'll certainly enter into dialogue. And indeed, if you listen to this and you want to be on one of these podcasts, reach out to us and that can be organised too. So a warm welcome to our listeners today. Without further ado, I'll just hand the floor over to you, Denis.
Thank you, Paul. Morning, everybody. I'm calling from not so sunny northwest London today. So as I said, just welcome everyone again. And as I said before, Paul's kindly asked me to share my experience, strength and hope. I'm going to try and keep it in order because it was, for me, in active addiction, it was very chaotic. A lot of it's very fuzzy. And there was a lot involved in there. So I'm going to try and just touch on, for the newcomers, mainly, what it was like. I can only speak from my experience. So what it was like for me from the start, and how this illness progressed over the years to a point where it broke me. It broke me on a number of occasions, and I was just reading something in the book, and it's in the doctor's opinion, and it's about the types. So type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5. I was an addict and an alcoholic of the chronic type, and I was taken through the work, fortunately, by somebody that knew what they were doing, but I'll touch on that later. I grew up in quite a rough council estate. I come from an Irish and Spanish background. So my grandparents were Spanish, my dad was Irish, my mum was English, and I grew up in quite a sort of rough council estate, where you had to sort of learn you had to be able to use your hands, so to speak. So it was a constant fight, a constant battle. I kind of went through school, but I was a very angry kid. So I came from a background with, my father was, I believe, an alcoholic, but most of the time he was a dry drunk and he was violent. And my mum was the complete opposite. Fortunately, I had a big family. My dad had, I think it was 10 sisters and 9 brothers, and my mum came from a big family as well. But we all sort of ended up in sort of northwest London, predominantly North London anyway. So from a very early age, I picked up alcohol. That was the first thing that I picked up, and I was sick. It made me sick. So I thought, I won't do that again. But I mean, drink within my household was was always there, and there was always lots of parties, and mainly at sort of weekends, and I had access to alcohol, so I kept sampling it. I just thought, okay, let's try this, let's try that one, let's try this one. Oh, I like that one. I like the feel of it. I think because of the violence towards my mother and me and my younger sibling, this is what made me. I was quite an angry kid, so I had a chip on my shoulder. So I'd be the first person in school. I would try to knock out the hardest person in the school, so no one would mess with me. And that's that's the type of kid that I was. I went through many different schools, and sort of drugs and alcohol really didn't come into it until the age of probably about, although I took my first sort of drink around sort of age 8 or 9, but I didn't really sample drugs per se until the age of probably about 12 or 13. And it was, at the time, it was sort of glue and Tipex and yeah, just stupid things like that, on the old weed joint, whatever we could get our hands on as school kids. And then I got expelled from a number of schools because I was just a hothead. I was violent, and I wouldn't have anyone tell me what to do. And yeah, that authoritative, any sort of authoritative figure, I just rebelled against. So yeah, anyway, I got expelled from several schools, and then I went to like an approved school where you only had to go 4 days a week, which I thought fantastic. You didn't have to turn up in the morning until 11 o'clock and you finished at 4. I thought that sounds ideal, perfect. So I did that, and I got, you could pick a subject at the time. So I picked bike maintenance and motocross. So we had a guy that was ranked 5th in Britain at the time. He was like a hardcore, he was really into it, professional guy, and I absolutely loved it. You could do this 1 day a week, and I could have gone pro with that. However, I got to the age of about 16 and girls got involved, and well, girls didn't get involved. Like, obviously it was me. I was looking for, I was getting quite a bit of female attention. I was always very good at sports, and I was a bit of a class clown. I was always a joker, so I was quite popular in school. And drugs and alcohol for me were a way with dealing with this anger that I always had. It was always there, and if I'm honest with you, it drove me in a lot of positive ways. So I learned how to channel it in a lot of positive ways through various different types of martial arts. I was always interested in sort of Bruce Lee films when I was a kid, and that sort of stuff. So I learned how to train my body, and I learned discipline from that. However, as the sort of scene progressed and I got a little bit older, I got into the sort of rave scene in the early, the late 80s and the early 90s. So we loved it, the illegal raves. Me and my friends, we'd be out sort of making money all week, just literally get locked into a rave. So we'd spend Friday, Saturday and Sunday locked in raves with house music and acid house music. And I loved that type of scene, but it turned into a full-time progression, or profession, should I say, looking back. So I love getting high. I love the feeling that it gave me. I love the people that I was around. Back in the day, it wasn't like the sort of drugs that we have now. It was sort of ecstasy and acid, and everybody loved each other, and so on and so forth. And what came with that then was criminality. I was quite an astute child. I was quite academic, and I was told in school that if I applied myself, I could do really well. However, I didn't have the support at home for that, and I was an angry kid, and I just thought, I'm going to do what I'm going to do anyway. To be honest with you, I don't really need to listen to you, and that was my attitude. And I ended up going to various different sort of young offenders institutions, and I was introduced to people that had a lot more knowledge around criminality and that side of things. And in addition to that, different types of drugs. And I tried cocaine and I absolutely loved it. The feeling that it gave me. Yeah, that's kind of a bit hazy, kind of that period. But it got to a point, let's get back on topic now. It got to a point where I kept doing these prison sentences and training my body and training my mind through various different types of books. And I was like a sponge. Give me a book on a certain subject and I'll read the book and I'll ask for another book. And I was constantly in the library all the time when you got access to it. So I was kind of self-taught. I had a lot of knowledge, and I believed wholeheartedly that when I got out, things would be different. Because I really didn't know what I was up against. And I got to a stage where I'd done a number of sentences, and I think I was at the age of about 19. And I did my first rehab, and I did primary care and the sort of first sort of break in denial. And so I got some sort of understanding. I'm not knocking rehabs, but they do their best. I had to be removed from society to stop what I was doing. I was a danger to myself. I was a danger to people around me. And I needed to be locked up. Let's have it right. In active addiction, I don't know anyone that can sort of carry on with no consequences, and they came very early on. I had my first child when I was I think 15. I have 5 children now with 3 different women and 2 grandchildren. Fortunately now, as a result, through working through the program, they're back in my life. Yeah, I'm going to skip, but anyway. Yeah, mainly, I had no mental defense around what was going to happen. I could not preempt what was going to happen when I put a substance or I put alcohol in my system. I didn't know where it was going to end. It was usually back in prison, or yeah, my whole mindset was it needed changing. And these self-development books and going to various different rehabs over a number of years through my early 20s and into my 30s was a bit like, it was a bit of a break, to be fair. And I always would conjure up in my mind, because I have a very funky mind and a very funky way of thinking, which I thought at the time that would always tell me that it'll be different next time. So maybe don't use that drug. Maybe we can safely use other drugs. I could not get my head around complete abstinence. It was just something that was like, really? So what do I do? So I can't use anything. And that was completely alien to me. And then later on down the line, after a number of escapades and a number of prison sentences and different relationships and having children, and the love of my children couldn't stop me using. The love of my parents and my grandparents and my aunties and my cousins, and them seeing me in a bad way and coming to visit me in various different prisons and rehabs, it couldn't stop me. I didn't know what I was up against. And then I went to, I think my first meeting that I went to was actually in prison. I was finishing off a sentence, and to be fair, it looked good on record. I would get parole. I was told if I attended a cognitive thinking skills course. Then I went to a number of meetings, and I was assigned this particular officer that was going to write a draft on for the parole board for me. And I went to a meeting, and I was absolutely blown away. I heard this guy. I think it was an NA meeting at the time. Could have been AA, I don't know. But this guy shared his experience, strength from hope, and his story was me. I listened to this guy, and I really, it was like you've got like 30 convicts in a room, and it means that you don't have to spend time in yourself. So obviously, of course, I'm going to go to a meeting, but I did actually take note. And there was something very early on. I always remember this. This guy spoke about this stuff, but he wasn't banging on about, yeah, I've been clean for X amount of time and I'm bored and this isn't happening for me and I can't. It wasn't all about him. He was talking about how enriched his life had become and how happy he was inside through working a very simple program. And this is all this is. And I have been given this freely from CA, from a sponsor that was armed or is armed with the facts. And he has a sponsor and his sponsor has a sponsor. And if he doesn't know something, he'll say, then I don't know, I'll check it out with my sponsor. But what he did was he literally, when I found this guy, like I got in contact with him later on when I got out, and he's not here anymore, unfortunately, but I was in then. So I had some sort of understanding of it, and I used it as a bit of a safety net. So I'd go out and have a use up. My story is, as I said, I can only speak from my experience. I think, okay. And there were periods of time that I could stop using. And because I was quite a bright kid and I'm very adaptable, as us addicts are, I got into employment. So I got out of crime and I got into various different types of employment and I was very good at it. So I worked as a stockbroker in my sort of late 20s as a junior, progressed to like a senior broker, then progressed to a sort of portfolio manager. And the world was my oyster. And through that whole period of time, there was no using in there. However, I did get to a point where I think, you know what, I could go and get a packet. I could have a couple of lines. I had a really good day today. But to be fair, I'd use on a bad day. I'd use on a good day. When I'm in full flight, it doesn't matter what the situation is. My wife's threatening to leave me. I'll go and use. I had no mental defense. I had lost the power of choice. Now, I eventually found a sponsor that sat me down and he explained the causes and conditions of this illness in a way that had never been explained to me before. So I was like a child, like literally, not on the outside, but inside and emotionally. And I was maladjusted to deal with when I opened the front door and introduced myself to the rest of the population out there. I can't cope with certain things. And I believe the core of what we suffer with as addicts, if you are an addict of the type that I am, of the hopeless type or the chronic type, we're in trouble. And I needed help. Now, all that self-help stuff, thousands and thousands of press-ups and pull-ups and all sorts of sort of physical stuff in the gym. What I couldn't get my head around is why I have to pick up, especially if the circumstances can be that dire. And I would swear off every evening, I will not use again. Or I might go have a year's period. That will never happen again. But you know what? As soon as I picked up, I'm off. And I'm locked behind a prison cell or behind a prison door or in a police station. And how the fuck, sorry to swear, how the fuck has this happened? Because I didn't know what I was up against. And I'm just, sorry, I've sort of digressed a little bit. So I found this guy, quite a humble guy, very intelligent guy, but his experience was almost identical to mine. He had no mental defense over picking up that first drink or that first line or whatever the drug or whatever the substance was. Then he sets off the phenomenon of craving. So he said, right, what we need to do is give you a solid foundation, a step one. So I did my step one, and then he took me through the work, took me through the pages. So I always thought that I'm God. I can run the show. If I stop using this drug or that drug, or just don't drink or drink at weekends, I couldn't do that anymore. If I use, I'm going to have a user. And when I'm like that and I put something in my system, I'm a completely different person. I'm in addict mode. So I'll take hostages. I'll take people with me. I will take stuff off you. I'm just, and it talks about in the book, these defects being removed. They're lifted. I mean, if you wholeheartedly are beat inside and you can't use safely and successfully anymore, then what I suggest is get a sponsor. Get someone that's armed with the facts. Not only that, but with depth and weight, that knows how to take somebody through the work. And you will hear it. You'll listen to some of these shares, or you'll go to a physical meeting. You will hear someone in a meeting, you think, right, approach the person, or they might even approach you. I know what I was scared, to be fair. I was full of fear, as he talks about in the book, 100 forms of fear, full of anger, full of resentment, and that's what we use on. Period. So it was about addressing that. So I did a really thorough step 4. I shared it with somebody that I'd built a relationship with, because there's some quite sensitive stuff that you need to share. So obviously you need to build that relationship, and you need to have a dialogue with someone before you pick them as a sponsor. But not only did I not just like this guy because he was quite an affable guy, he was a good character and whatever, but he was also quite humble, and he showed humility, and that was something that was completely alien to me. And I thought, you know what, I can trust this guy over a period of time. So I went through the work, and now I got to a place where, through prayer and meditation mainly, now that was completely alien to me. I just thought physically and train my body, practice certain disciplines, read certain books. Prayer and meditation was something that I never did. But prayer and meditation for me is key. It is absolutely vital, because what I got to a stage through going through the work with this sponsor. Not only did I get an understanding of me and what it is that I was up against, later on through the book, I got to clean house. I learned how to keep my side of the street clean. And also I learned how to help others, how to practice patience, how to practice tolerance. And through that, I went through a series of experiences. I wasn't one of them people that God just hit me straight away and I had this sort of epiphany and I had this shining light. I was a bit of a late developer with this stuff. Some people are, some people aren't. I can only speak from my experience. But I got to a stage through prayer and meditation and working with this guy where I became awake. I also became aware, and I also became conscious, which is those 3 things are quite profound. And I learned that through practicing this meditation that he sent me. And also he would ask me, Dennis, how's the meditation going? And I would go, some days I'd be a bit lazy with it, but he went, listen, if you want me to work with you, if you're that fed up, I'm going to suggest that you do this. Are you willing to do this? And I went, do you know what? I went, yeah. So I'll do it first thing in the morning, my prayer and meditation. I'll do it last thing at night. Sometimes I'll do it during the day. It's just to keep me on an even keel and also aligning myself with my higher power. And I have no problem with the word God today. I really don't, because he's not only looking after me and my family, he's looking after my sponsors, and he helps me deal with day-to-day situations that I can't deal with. So sometimes I can go within myself to that safe place. I can talk to my higher power and I will ask him, how would you have me deal with this situation? So I practice these principles in all of my affairs. I'm not perfect by any means. Okay, now don't get me wrong. I mean, if someone's going to attack my family or if I'm under threat, spiritual principles are going to go completely out the window. I'm going to go in defense mode and I'm going to look after my family. I'm going to look after me. But they're very rare, those things that happen. Unfortunately, I don't, through sort of working this program and working with others and practicing these spiritual principles in all my affairs and mainly living my life through step 10, 11 and 12, on a daily. The obsession has been lifted, so I don't think about using anymore. And I don't have any cravings because I don't trigger it. You hear a lot of stuff in these meetings where people say that they go to meetings and I did that. There's lots of things that are bandied around and suggestions, and there's a lot of treatment talk in there, so that it's not from the AA Big Book. They mean well, a lot of these treatment centres, and they saved my life on a number of occasions because they got me clean, they got me off the street, they saved me from going to prison and so on and so forth. But life isn't like that today. As I mentioned earlier, as a result of working through the steps and being brutally honest, and you know what? I didn't like a lot of these words, fully conceding. I mean, conceding to me is failure, but I was killing myself and I was hurting others. And but once I got an understanding of that, and I kept coming back, but going to bundles of meetings and collecting key rings didn't keep me clean. It didn't keep me sober. Working the steps with a sponsor that was armed with the facts gave me an understanding of what I need to do. So I was guided through the work. He didn't tell me what to do. He just gave me suggestions. And this is what I do with my sponsees. I suggest things. I'm not all powerful. I'm not omnipotent. I have a higher power, and I align myself with this power, and he shows me what to do in any given moment. Now that was difficult because when I throw myself, I felt naked, if I'm honest with you. So I'd leave my front door every day and I'm thinking, right, okay, I'm working these spiritual principles, but he isn't and she isn't, and life chucks things at you. So I did all the logistics. When I tried to stop using, I blamed everyone else. I traveled to different countries and worked in other countries. I swapped one girlfriend for another girlfriend because it's her fault, or it's this country's no good. But at the end of the day, wherever I went, I took me with me. And today, thankfully for Cocaine Anonymous and finding a number of sponsors and a sponsor in the end that literally saved my life. I owe my life to this program, and I have no qualms in saying that, and I have no qualms in saying that I pray and meditate because it's empowering. And this is what I try and show my sponsees. There is empowerment in these steps. Okay, you'll get an understanding of yourself, and it will guide you through it, and then you'll be in a position of service. And I love that. I love the whole principles and the three pertinent ideas. And I'm waffling on a little bit, but from somebody that was literally in a bed sit, just out on parole, that was giving sort of piss tests 2 days a week, and just hell. I'm in a point now where I have 2 lovely homes. I have my children back in my life. I have a lovely wife. I have nothing to moan about. I have so much to be grateful for. And most importantly, I have a power in my life that I can tap into when I need to. And there's been a shift in thinking, and there's been a change. And predominantly, there's been a change within me and inside and outwardly. It's different. I can't explain it because I probably won't do it justice if I do explain it. I can't explain my higher power to you because I won't do him justice. It's something that this program is. It's not an analytical program. It's an experiential program. Paul, I think I've waffled on long enough.
That was great,
so
Dennis.
I'll leave it there, buddy. Yeah?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So much identification. And every time I listen to Dennis, it's real talk. It's the real message of hope, faith, and courage. And in these rooms, we get identification with the problem, the malady, active addiction, and we get identification with the solution, with the steps, with the fellowship, with the meetings. And it was just such a strong, clear message. and put across so clearly and simply that anyone can understand it, you know. And I think that's the wonderful thing, and that's a real gift, you know. It's a real gift. So just want to chime in a few sort of halftime mentions at this point. Please feel free to contribute to conversation in the chat below. At the beginning of this podcast, I put up on the screen some information about meetings, Zoom meetings. So feel free to pause and rewind this video. Remember, you can do that as often as you like, and you'll see the meeting screen was up there about 15 minutes ago. And get yourself along to a Zoom meeting if you're struggling with drug addiction, and you can hear people like Denis share every day. Never be put off going to a Zoom meeting thinking you have to put your camera on. Only about a quarter of the fifth of attendees do that anyway, and only about a quarter of a fifth talk. So don't feel you even need to talk if you want to go along to a Zoom meeting and listen to the message of strength, experience, and hope. You're very, very welcome at a Zoom meeting. So come along to some meetings. Yeah, check out the other podcasts, and you know, we do recover, we do get well, we do improve. You know, you never need to use drugs again. You know, freedom from active addiction is absolutely achievable. And you know, for the purpose of identification, you know, for me, going from spoons and works to you know, and large quantities of gear and loads of you know, over 7 or 8 police raids, you know, I can relate. You know, we are free, Denis, and we're free by God's grace and mercy, and by the power of the fellowship, you know, and God's power in these rooms. So, you know, I wanted to ask you, what in your opinion keeps people coming back to Cocaine Anonymous, Denis?
It's a bit of an umbrella question, that, Paul, but yeah, it's fine. I don't know. I can share my experience, but for other people, we all come from different walks of life. We all come from different nationalities. We've all got our own sort of concepts and ideas of things. I think what keeps people coming back, that I can clearly see through people that I'm working with and other people that I see on these Zoom meetings, which are great, and physical meetings, is a desire to stop using, and a willingness, because a lot of people that I've met over the years, Paul, in these rooms, they're broken. So it's like the last stop shop. So I think people keep coming back because they hear something that resonates with them. They're around people that are sharing literally like their story. All right, it might sort of vary, and the types of drugs might vary, and rock bottoms might vary. But what I think about what keeps people coming back is fellowship, is identification, is and also solution-based meetings where they can hear how people have got out of that situation where they don't have to use anymore, if that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely, it does. Absolutely. You know, and I was thinking about, you know, the power of the experience, really. And, you know, many people come to the rooms and, you know, their notion of a higher power is simply a group of folks that have got clear and have stayed clear of active addiction, you know, and seem to be reasonably content. And that works really, really, really well. You know what I mean? And if that's some people's concept of higher power, I've seen that work really well for people, you know, because the ancient principle is in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm quite sure, Denis, if I had a problem and rang you and 2 or 3 other folks in recovery and took your counsel, it would be all right, right? And that's how it works. And not only that, many of us...
One addict working with another is without parallel, mate.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I think the other thing as well is many of us come for our drinking and we stay for our thinking, or we come for our using and we stay for our well-being. You know, and the reality is we can face any situation, feeling, or circumstance clean and sober without feeling the need to get off our trolleys. You know, we don't need to medicate on our wounds. You know, the only consequences today for me are good consequences. And furthermore, the consequence of my using history, which thankfully was a long while ago, there's not many consequences left. There's financial consequences that I still live with, but that's it. You know, that is it. That's life. You know what I mean? We can address things. We can try to repair the hedge, as it were, when we can make amends, which isn't just an apology. It's, look, I went wrong. I made a blunder. You know, how can I put it right? Is there anything I can do to put this right? Not every bridge can be rebuilt, but in the process, we find ways, through grace and mercy, through higher power, through the wise counsel of others, to handle ourselves and handle the things we've been through, and live with ourselves. Perhaps we've been through traumatic things in our lives, right? Perhaps things have gone wrong in a financial sense or a marital sense. You know, I'm sure many of us blokes can relate to that over and over again, relationships going wrong. Children, you know, one of my sons is a drug dealer, Dennis. What are you going to do about it? We all are adults with choices. He knows what I have to say about it, but that's his reality at the present time, you know. And just to come back to my second question, you know, and so you've already answered this largely, but in a nutshell, just for our listeners and particularly newcomers, you know, persons that are brand new to recovery and 12-step meetings, because I'm conscious that people that are brand new to 12-step recovery, whether it's NA, CA or AA, it can seem unusual. How would you define the problem of addiction, stroke, alcoholism?
How would I define the problem of alcoholics in a simple solution? Yeah, I mean, there's an argument about this, that we suffer from a threefold illness or a twofold illness, which I'm not going to get into, Paul. For me personally, I know that I suffer from an illness that centers in the mind. I have a mental obsession, and once I put a substance in my system, I set off a physical craving. If you can get that concept, it took me many years to get that. So if I look back at my experience, it shows me that I was insane. I kept repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again and expected different results. So for me, in answer to try and sum up that question, Paul, is I got an understanding of what I was up against. Not only that, is how to recover from this hopeless state of mind and body in Cocaine Anonymous, with a sponsor, being honest, even a little bit of willingness. I went, okay, well, that doesn't sound too tough. I'll try that. I've done tougher things, to be fair. And I got to a point where I mean, it wasn't like overnight, but I put the work in. So anyone that's new, that's coming in, that's seeing all this sort of people talking about sort of God and meditation, and the way that the steps are set out, usually in the old Alcoholics Anonymous meetings back in the day, I think some of them still are, all these steps are set out in this, and it can be quite overwhelming. And a lot of people, they don't come back. What I would suggest is just give it a go, or give yourself a break, give yourself a chance. There's some really beautiful people that I've met, not just here in the UK, but all over the world, that suffer from this. And this is the beauty of Zoom. We all share the same common thread. We all come from different walks of life. However, we can't use, if you're an addict and an alcoholic of my type, which you'll work that out through going through the work with a sponsor, I can't use safely. I'm at dis-ease with myself. However, my brain, with that mental twist and that mental blank spot, will always try to tell me that things will be different this time. And this is what we're up against. This is what we suffer with, but there is a way out. So anyone that's new, I would just suggest stick around, find a sponsor, somebody that you mainly get identification with, and build a relationship with them and give yourself a chance. I mean, if I could still be out there using, I would. All right, I loved drugs. I'm not going to bang on about that too much, but what I didn't love was the consequences, which always came, Paul. I'm sure you'll agree with me. If I could do it successfully, I'd still be out there doing it now. But I got to a point where I was broken. I knew that I couldn't do it. I didn't know what the solution was. And thankfully, I found it. And thank God also for them first 100 people that it talks about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that wrote this book that were recovered alcoholics. So they recovered from this hopeless state of mind and body and laid out a guide for us. And people are still doing it, and people are still recovering, and people are having their children back in their lives, and they've got so much quality of life. They're so much more enriched, and you can see it in people, and it's a beautiful thing, Paul, if that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings me organically on to the next question. I've just got 2 questions left around the steps, and that brings me right on to step 1, which is what I was going to ask you about, which you pretty much covered already, is the issue of powerlessness and consequences and unmanageability, the personal unmanageability, and the honesty of step 1. Could you talk about that for a minute or so?
Yeah, I mean, step 1, like my sponsor said to me, what we need then is we need an absolutely solid foundation going onwards from here. So I need to make sure that you know what it is that you're up against. So I've asked people about what does they say? Well, I'm just powerless. I'm powerless over this and I'm powerless over that. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? What does powerless mean to you? And that I get very different types of answers from various different people. But if I speak to somebody that's actually gone through the work in the correct manner and has recovered from it, they'll just simply say to me that powerlessness is a number of things. It's just keep it very simple. I'm powerless over what happens to me when I put a substance in my system. Okay. Secondly, I've got, through working through steps 2 and 3 and really getting my head around that and conceding to that and going, you know what, I can't do it on my own. I need something outside of me, which for some people can be the meetings, it can be fellowship, it can be, but for me, it's God. I'm not going to Bible bash, but you become if you have a problem, for instance, you look for a solution. So your problem is you step 1. I'm powerless over what happens and where I take people and the destruction that happens when I take drugs and alcohol. And in addition to that, the power is going through the work. So you become from a position of powerless to a position of being empowered through working through the steps, all of them, and giving your whole sort of existence, your whole life, every bit of effort that you can sum up. I'm sure if you wanted to go out and score something, you had no money, you'd put 100% effort into that. Just put a little, even half the amount of effort that you put into this work, and I guarantee, it says in the book, there's promises in there, you'll recover. So you go from a position of powerlessness, which is talks about in step 1, and you go from a position of power. Absolutely. Or you're in a position of power, or empowerment, should I say.
Yeah. And, that brings me on to the last question, last topic. And, the solution is in the steps. It's in intensive step work. How intensive? Well, the reality is, Dennis, some people go through all 12 steps in 4 hours, right? I know people that take people through that on a weekly basis, and I know people that have stayed clean after doing that. That's not how I see things. For me, I like to spend more than 4 hours on the first 3 steps. I know people in other fellowships in NA that spend several months on step 1. I like to get people through these steps in 3 or 4 weeks, if they've got the time. I think it's really important to be properly taken through these steps. And step 1 is like the foundation, The foundation has to be right. It doesn't matter how bonny your walls are and your windows and your roof and your rooms and your furniture. If the foundation isn't right, no, the foundation has to be right. And that is step one, right? I honestly, usually for the first time, Dennis, look at the realities of my using, right? The consequences, the unmanageability, the powerlessness. Now, it's a very complex point, is powerlessness, because no human is powerless, otherwise they'd be dead. No human is powerless. But so as a sliding scale, what we mean is the unmanageability and the consequences were undesirable. So therefore, there was like an internal argument going on. Part of us knew that we need to stop using, but we were unable to stop because part of us wanted to use drugs.
Yeah.
Regardless of consequences, I just want to carry on using that ease and comfort, that
that release. Yeah.
That hit on that pipe, that talk on that blunt, that swig of that cider, that feeling. Oh, wow. But to get that day after day after day, week in, month in, year in recovery, in abstinence, in practicing a simple program of action that's available to anyone, the disease, the problem of addiction can be arrested at any point. Recovery is possible. So, we do have 2 podcasts on step 1, actually, where we discuss at length these things. And it was just really, we do say things like the solutions in the steps, and what we mean is by putting actual pen to actual paper and looking at our whole lives, through the process of the steps. I've got 2 chapters on step 4 right now.
You'll see a pattern of powerlessness through that, Paul.
Precisely. And you know what, interestingly enough, there's another brother who went through the process a year ago, and he stayed clean completely, continuously, and he's done really well. He's a changed person. He's had that personality change, that psychic change, that change of perception.
Fantastic.
And so we was going through a fresh round of the steps recently, and when we got to step 4, he hardly had any resentments, fears, or harms. Dennis, he had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 in total. And we're both like, well, why is this? So we did a search in the fearless moral inventory why he was resentment free and free of fear and free of harm largely. And the answer was, he was practicing prayer, meditation, he was listening in meetings. Okay, he'd eased off a bit on his prayer and his meetings, but basically he was living according to spirit instead of according to flesh. He was in that process of change, and he's a right good lad, and to see people, families reconciled, marriages, relationships healed, children back in people's lives.
It's stuff for dreams, isn't it?
It really is. And people becoming employable again and responsible members of society.
Yeah.
Look, that's going to be a wrap today. Anyway, it's been wonderful, as I knew it would be. So thank you so much. I'd just like to give the floor to you for a minute if there's anything you'd like to say to our listeners before we bring proceedings to a close.
I think mainly, Paul, just to wrap it up, as I said when I started, anyone that's new, anyone that's back, stick at it. What have you got to lose? I mean, you might think that there might be some people in there that don't think that they're worth anything. You are. And you can get to a place where you can hear people sharing about, I've got like X amount of years in, or I've got like 100 years in, or it doesn't matter about time. It really matters about what you do. And if you've had enough, if you have enough, there's a solution within this work. And just I'll leave it on this. Paul, you did mention earlier about certain different sponsors and the way that some people rapidly take people through the work. 6 days is a new one on me. I've not heard that before, but my first sponsor said to me, listen, we'll do a step a year. Now, I was new into the program. I just got out of rehab and I thought, okay, this guy must know what he's talking about. But ultimately, I relapsed. A step a year. I mean, come on. We've got a solution. Have a look at what it says in the book. What Bill and Bob did, rapidly just took people through the work. I mean, it usually takes me 6 to 8 weeks, dependent on time, as you said, dependent on willingness of the person. and depending on what state they're in. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a life coach. I'm a guide, and my sponsor's a guide, and his sponsor's a guide. And all we do is we suggest and we'll give you an angle on maybe look at this or maybe look at that, but it's all laid completely out for us in this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So get a sponsor, keep turning up at meetings, and mainly find your own people that you can be honest and open with, and this is going to serve you well in the future. Paul, thanks very much for letting me share today. It's great to be of service, buddy.
It's been really, really good of you to come along, you know, and I've enjoyed every word. So thank you so much. Okay, family, that's going to be a wrap for today. Please continue to check on the videos. We've got upcoming content. If you have any suggestions or you'd like to be on one of these, pop your name in the chat and we'll reach out to you. Okay, family. Thanks very much, Dennis.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, everyone else.
Okay, ciao for now. Bye-bye.
God bless.